Last episode, I ran you through a typical ground component for an RPL flight test. In this episode, we're going to move on to the flight test component itself, what's involved, common errors, and simple ways to be prepared for success. I'm going to discuss all that and more coming right up, so strap in and let's get into it.
Good morning, 3614, 95 Mallow, 7 POB with altitude.
Coordinating, Hale on a runner, bank, tower, bank pressure rolling to 30 degrees. That's 30 degrees there.
Stand by star 9000, 1013, KFR 25.
G'day everyone and welcome to episode 203 of the Flight Training Australia podcast. The podcast all about flight training and flying in Australia and beyond. G'day, I'm your host Trent Robinson. Thank you for joining me. Well, another couple of weeks gone by. How have you been? Lots going on. I can tell you what, the dry season is here. I was actually cold last night, but more so the smoke. My goodness. If you haven't seen the smoke up here, I've been posting a few photos. I'll post them all this week. But yeah, it is getting quite bad at some spots. VMC conditions getting pushed to the limit and very, very smoky and hazy. But we are also getting those incredible golden orb sunsets that you see up here. Spectacular stuff. And of course we've got the Diamond Storm exercise going on at the moment, which is the pretty sure it's combat instructor graduation training basically. And F-35s and the Super Hornets are up here doing their thing. A few little delays and hold-ups, but the new system's working pretty well with the priority windows. I don't think everyone's having too many dramas, but it's always the return when the jets come back that seems to hold everybody up still, because that can happen at any time. But plenty of jet activity up here every morning and afternoon, and no doubt night exercises will start shortly as well. And if you get to sit at the holding point there and watch that afterburner deflect off the runway as the jets lift off, that is pretty spectacular as well. But you don't want to be sitting there waiting for that to happen every single time usually. Unless you're absolutely fully into it, then you'll be probably having a ball. But yeah, plenty going on. A bit of flying, but yeah, how is the weather in your neck of the woods? If you're a charter pilot, what's it like? How's the flying going? And how is the fuel crisis affecting tourism in your area? I was just over in Broome the other week, and it was fantastic to spend the time again with Flynn Smith there, who's the HOFO at Air Kimberley, and catch up a few of the others there as well. G'day, Holly. Met her as well. And yeah, like a bit dead, guys. Broome was a bit slow, not the usual hustle and bustle. I was actually quite late in booking accommodation and was a bit worried I might not get something, but there's still people around, but definitely not as many people traveling with the price of fuel, which is a shame. And that is, of course, then impacting on charter jobs and getting a job, but also those who already have a job and something to do. Some full-time, that puts a lot of strain on the operation. Others that are casual, better for the operator, not better for the pilot, because you're going days without jobs, without flying, without pay. And of course, if you want to have a second job, that's quite possibly hinging off tourism as well. So yeah, if you're having some issues out there and struggling a little bit, or things are a bit slow, let me know. Love to hear from you. And just so help me keep my finger on the pulse of what's going on. But there was wonderful flying over in Broome and in the caravan there, and 210 with Flynn just getting his OPC and his first 12-month FPC done. So that's reset now for another 24 months this time. It's great to catch up with everybody. Now, also Adam Holt and Izzy Bryan up there at Horizontal Falls. It was great to have dinner with them and catch up and find out what's going on in their neck of the woods. But very much the same, a little bit slow. So hopefully the fuel price is under 2 litres a litre here in Darwin for diesel. So hopefully things will pick up and the tourism stuff will start kicking off again as people start to travel and get out and explore and spend their money, which is what all those areas desperately need. Speaking of spending money, I'm heading over to Cairns next week. The RAAA, or the Regional Aviation Aircraft Association Convention is on in the Cairns Convention Centre, June 16 to 18. It's not too late. If you're wanting to go, the schedule is all up on the website there. You can definitely go and check that out. Tickets are available, and you can also have a look at the program and everything that's on there as well. But should be a great event. There's several hundred or a few hundred people going already, I believe, but there is room for some more. And what more so popped up that really interested me was me banging the cage a little bit with things. And CASA, like, I'm not saying it's because of me, but I think it's because of a few people mentioning things and discussing things. But CASA are going to set up a little pilot development workshop, which is naturally right up my alley, and hopefully going to have some really great conversation with other WHOs, HOFOs, check-in trainers, whoever comes. It's only limited to 20 that can participate, but I'm very much excited about that because it was kind of the whole reason I wanted to go, is to get in front of CASA and raise some issues, and this is going to be part of that forum. And I have some big plans for later in the year to progress from that. So hopefully this can sort of help underpin all that and meet some other like-minded people who are having the same issues and get some heads together and start working on some change. So that in mind, what I would love from you guys is many of you have already at some point emailed me with your trials and tribulations and the issues you're having. But it's not all negative, Nancy. Also, where you've had some fantastic training and really great experiences as well. I want to know about all of it. All right. Now, my plans, as I said, are to meet further with CASA delegates once I set some things up, hopefully next week. But I need something from you all. And as with anything, when you want change, if one person's just nagging you, if you ignore them, eventually you're going to go away. However, if we all start making noise, then eventually we're going to have to stop and take notice. And I need you guys to start making more noise. All right. So if you're having if you're a student and you're having issues, or you're in an environment that's working really, really well, I want to hear from you. What is working? What isn't working? Where's it falling apart? If you're an instructor who struggled with the training that you've received, or you've been on the end of some fantastic training and mentoring, I want to know about it. How it's worked, what the environment is, and if you're an operator just frustrated with the quality of applicants that's coming through, your ICAS training is blowing out, or there's certain locations where graduates are constantly proving to be fantastic, and you can get on with the true meaning of ICAS and what it's actually there for. I want to know about it. I need to spread the net far and wide. So if you are willing, I'm happy to. I would desensitize everything, of course, whenever I can compile everything, but as much detail as possible. If you want to tell me where you are and all that, that just helps me. I'm not going to name and shame or anything like that, but it just helps me understand the nature of the operation and where the issues may be, so we can make change. Again, I'm not here to name and shame, call people out, embarrass or humiliate anybody. I just want to help make things better. And the way I can do that is with accurate information. So everything's not all bad. There's plenty of good out there as well. All right. But I need you to raise your concerns yourself with your flight school, with your examiners, with CASA. If you don't know how go about that, I'll let you know soon, because I'm going to try and get some key points of contact where this feedback can come in after this workshop. And I'll let you know more about that in the coming weeks when I get back. All right. But in the meantime, send me those emails, info@trentrobinsonaviation.com.au. I would dearly love to hear from you. And as so many of you have emailed me a message, and I'll try and add my best advice that I can give at the time and help you out. But ultimately, we all love what we do. We're all here to work together, have an amazing adventure, and go flying safely. And that's all I ever want, is all of us to be able to have a well-trained, well-exposed training regime that arms us as well as it can to go out in the big yonder and continue to learn. All right, so let's get into today's topic, which is the RPL flight tests. And there are a few things we need to talk about. So hopefully you've got through your ground component by this stage, and it's time to go flying. Now, before you go flying, it's important that the examiner sets you up for success as much as possible. And there's a few things that they're going to go through with you. And part of it is obviously the component, the flight component, how it's going to be structured. Now, this will vary slightly, and the order of events will vary slightly depending on your location. As with anything, when we put together a flight test route, if you like, or a bit of a sequence of events, it will usually be structured to facilitate the area in which you're operating in and which aerodromes. You may not be doing it all at the aerodrome you departed from, how your training area is set up and all that sort of stuff. But they will brief you on the rough flow of what's going to happen. And the flight test form has everything on it there. So they would have checked that you've seen the flight test form before, and you should have been given that well and truly before the test date. But just to recap again, if you Google RPL flight test form will work, but it's form number 61-1486, and that's the recreational pilot license aeroplane test form. And that has all the flight component elements on there. All right. Now, all the flying that's going to be done, remember, is going to be done to a certain test standard. And that test standard is based on the level of license you're going for. Now, the RPL is going to be tested at the private level. Now, this all comes from Schedule 8 in the manual standards of Part 61. Now, when you Google Part 61 manual standards, you'll see on the CASA website there are 4 volumes, and in the 4th volume, that has schedules 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. All right, Volume 1, 2, and 3 are Schedule 1, 2, and 3. And yeah, Volume 4 is at the end, and that's the big one there. This is where we get the plus or minus 150 feet for altitude holding, and plus or minus 5 knots, 10 knots on the glide speed, 10 degrees plus or minus on your heading change, all that sort of thing. All right, so this is all very, very important numbers, because this is what we're going to be partially assessing you against. But the key to remember here is that the manual standards flight tolerances is just part of what it is that we need to see you do. So you should know these speeds and these tolerances, because this is what you should have been trained towards the whole time you've been flying. All right, but remember that the flight examiner handbook that I mentioned the other week also has components that are forming part of the assessment, which include your technique, your smoothness of flying, your accuracy, your judgment, your procedures, your knowledge and flight management. All of these things form part of how we are assessing whether the maneuver you just performed was to the standard that we're looking for the flight test. All right, so the Schedule 8 tolerances are just part of that. They're not the whole thing. All right, so make sure that when you do fly, for example, you might notice that you're a little bit high. You'll pop up too high and you'll bunt it forward to go, oh, I'm too high. All right, well, that's not going to really help with your smoothness. But, you know, again, we could understand that, all right, you just sort of overshot and whoops, let's see what happens. But if you're jerking back and forwards on the controls all the time and rough on the throttle and all that sort of stuff, that would form part of our assessment that, you know, you're not really doing that to the standard that we would like to see. Now, while we're talking about tolerances, what meets the standard as far as up and down? Now, remember, if you go within 150 feet and not outside, that might be fine, but your judgment and technique's probably not right because you're not trimming the airplane properly. But what constitutes a fail is typically when we get to a sustained error. All right. And that's basically where you perform an error and don't do anything about it. All right. So if you sit at 200 feet too high, regardless of how you got there, whether it was not trimming properly or thermals or whatever, that's going to be where we're going to have an issue. All right. So if you're consistently doing something, do it a few times and it's a sustained error, that's where we might go, yeah, all right, we're not maintaining height. That's no good. Now, that wouldn't necessarily result in an immediate fail at that point. You may fail straight and level flight, but it's a non-safety critical item. All right. So generally speaking, non-safety critical items, you get to continue off, go flying, and try and get some more credits. And then you'll find out at the end that, look, generally speaking, it all went really well, but there's a few bits and pieces here that aren't up to the standard that we're looking for, and that's going to have to be repeated. Now, whether there's some remedial training in the middle of that or it was just you having a bad day, we'll decide on that. And if you need to go up with an instructor just to tidy things up, we'll do that. And we've got 28 days, as we said, to come back and finish the test. All right, but safety critical items, these are some of the things where common fail items happen. All right, and again, the safety critical items list is by no means exhaustive, but some typical ones that you want to just be mindful of. For example, failure to complete a checklist item mandated by the aircraft flight manual. All right, so if you're not using the checklist, that's going to be a fail. That's an immediate fail, and we need to stop the test and go back. All right, so how many people get a bit lazy with their checklists? All right, failure to completely prepare the aircraft for flight. So if you have not done a proper pre-flight inspection, sign the maintenance release, make sure everything that needs to be on the airplane is on the airplane, or you try and take an airplane airborne that is not airworthy, regardless of your opinion, but by law, then that would be a fail. Okay, now, for example, I had a test with CASA a few weeks ago, and the stall warning wasn't working. Absolute pain in the butt. Tried to fix it. We sprayed it. Tried to contact clean it. And no joy. Now, if I tried to just go, oh, well, look, it's okay. You know, I know how to recover from a stall and all that's no dramas, and take that airplane airborne, I would have failed on the spot. All right. Just unfortunately, it is a mandatory item, needs to be fixed. All right. So that's something to be mindful of. If you're not sure, you can't ask your examiner necessarily, but you could go and ask an engineer or somebody else if there's a problem with the airplane and get it looked at. All right? And that's the behavior that we want to see. If there's something you're not sure about, go get it checked. Failure to comply with air traffic control clearances, airspace requirements, including VMC, failure to operate the airplane within the limitations. So if you overspeed the flaps or the undercarriage or anything like that, that'll be a fail. Go back home. Fail to maintain required flight visibility and cloud separation during a visual segment. So as I said, VMC, very, very important. Maintain required terrain clearance. So again, you get yourself a bit close to terrain or obstacles, or not complying with minimum descent altitudes, which generally wouldn't be something for an RPL test, but it could be if you have to maintain a certain altitude into a Class D airport versus a Class G airspace. Obviously, there's a few extra constraints there you've got to be careful of. All right, failure to maintain traffic separation. If you have traffic coming inbound, you ignore them or don't really process their radio call that they are a factor for you, that's a big problem. Handover takeoff technique and appropriate lookout. All right, big one. Clear right, center left, turn. Don't just drop the wing and bank. So these are all ways that you can fail a flight test. Some that will be an immediate fail and go home. Others are non-critical and you'll manage to get some points for later on. Now, that will all get mentioned at the very beginning of the test. We don't typically go through all that right before you're going to go flying, because that's just not going to put you in a great mindset, is it? It's going to be a bit rough. All right, so we'll typically go through all that in the beginning, but just so we're talking about the flight component, I just wanted to go through that again so that you are all very clear as to what we're looking for, and this is how we decide whether a maneuver was performed to an appropriate standard or not. All right, so across to the test form, as we said, 3.1 pre-flight is the first bit there, and perform pre-flight actions and procedures, the pre-flight inspection and refuel aircraft. So it doesn't matter whether the airplane's flown already or not, or the maintenance release has been signed or not, but you need to do a full pre-flight in front of the examiner so they can see that you do it properly. They'll want to see you go through the maintenance release and have it signed if it's not already, and show when it expires, how many hours are left on the aircraft, and if there's any maintenance items that are due or have been noted on the maintenance release that haven't been fixed yet. And again, like I said earlier, may ground your aircraft. So make sure you check all that. You then want to make sure the aircraft is refueled. Now, if you're not needing fuel, part of the question of the preparation of the ground component is how much fuel you're going to need for your flight. But we may ask you about if we're just like a simulated refueling. If we're going to go to the fuel bowser, how we set the aircraft up. If the fuel truck comes, what precautions are you going to take there? Am I allowed into the aeroplane? All that sort of stuff. All right, then we go into the ground operations, takeoff, departure, and climb. Now, most examiners, I think, usually have the option of doing a short field takeoff here. It may not always happen, but usually that's what we do to get that one done, and then allow you just to depart and climb out to the training area of your nominated aerodrome. So that's going to change. If you're in Class G airspace, that's going to be pretty quick and easy. It's just going to be a circuit departure or an overhead departure, and not far to go to get into the training area. If you're in a Class D aerodrome, it's obviously going to take a little bit more. So there's naturally going to be some straight and levels, some climbing turns happening in amongst that. And part of that process is a maximum rate, angle, or cruise climb. All right, so any two of those. So we might ask you just to use best rate up to 2,500 feet or something to have that demonstrated there. And there we go. We've just ticked off a couple of items off the checklist already. Now, one that is in there that can cause a little bit of confusion, and that is conduct crosswind takeoff. Now, there is not always a crosswind available. This is one of the few items on a flight test form that examiners can put down to training records. All right, but what we do need to do is establish that you have flown that aircraft to at least 70% of its crosswind capability. And that's right the way through to PPL, RPL, CPL, everything. All right, so instructors, if you do fly in a crosswind, it's always nice to note the strength of the crosswind, and not, I don't want the wind, but the actual crosswind component, because that's what we're measuring here. All right, so 70% of the crosswind component, as long as the student has done that a couple of times, then that's what we're looking for. Now, one area that I do find with a lot of people coming up to Darwin is it's almost like crosswinds are a mythical creature and they don't actually exist in real life. Okay, I understand that there's not always a crosswind when you need one, but you should have had several opportunities to fly some crosswind approaches. So make sure you do cover that off well. Obviously, it's RPL stages, early days, but as we work through the PPL and CPL, they should have plenty of opportunity to handle crosswinds because they are a fact of life, and one thing that will lead to bingling an aeroplane if you're not careful. En route cruise is the next bit. So then we go into some straight and level and turning. So looking for your medium turns and steep turns. The test-specific activities are stalling. So you need to recover from a stall, one in the approach configuration, and one stall should be a wing drop stall. Now, these are fully developed stalls, not recovering at the sign of buffet or when the stall warning goes off. All right, steep turns of at least 45 degrees, so it could be 60. All right, and I encourage 60 degrees. Some examiners back off 60 degrees for RPL, but do the 60s and 40 in PPL and CPL exams. But definitely 45 degrees angle of bank. So again, making sure that you're practicing those properly, you're maintaining altitude, nice smooth entry. Remember, a 45 degree turn, slightly higher and steeper than a 30-degree turn. Use the visuals out the front. Don't watch the instruments. Very common for students to follow the instruments too much, trying to get it absolutely nailed and not looking outside. Remember your work cycle, attitude lookout, attitude performance. Right, some instrument flying and unusual attitude recoveries. That's all full panel. That won't take too long, but again, long enough just to be able to assess that you can actually maintain altitude and fly headings. And then we move into some circuit work. So part of the circuits will be a engine failure after takeoff. There is a forced landing that's needed. Normal circuits, normal procedures. So you're going to do normal flapless short field. A go around has to happen in there. Whether that happens because you mess one up yourself, make the decision and go around. Now remember our Schedule 8 tolerances there, that when we have a aiming point for the runway, we need to have a aiming point, then a nominated touchdown point of 120 meters plus or minus. So that's a 240 meter strip of runway that you've got to allow the aircraft to settle down on. It's quite a large area. If you float past that, you're carrying excess speed, or you haven't pulled the throttle off properly when you've come in and rounded out to flare and land there. So make sure that you're doing the proper technique. If you're going to miss that point, then good technique will be to go around. All right, that way you've observed the MOS Schedule 8 tolerances and you've made a good command decision. All right, even if there's 3 kilometers of runway left, it's not about how much runway is in front of you today. It's about touching down in the right spot so that when there isn't much runway in front of you, you have no issues. All right. All the while, coming back, shutting the aircraft down, remembering it's not over until the aircraft's back in the parking spot, shut down and keys turned off. But the general requirements are all your NTS 1.1s, 1.2, 1.3 and NTS 2s. So they are your maintain effective lookout, your situational awareness, making good decisions and setting priorities and managing tasks. All right, so you would have done all these things throughout your flight training, making sure that you're allowing for, doing checklists over aviate, navigate, communicate, following that methodology. All right, but managing and recognizing threats, errors, and undesired aircraft states, really, really important. All right. Ultimately, radio calls, making sure you're using the right radio procedures in the area that you're operating in, and just having a good flight. All right, so it's all over on the flight test form there. Make sure you've gone through that. That flight test form is not for the flight examiner to just fill in and hand in to CASA at the end of it all. It's for you too. This will tell you exactly what's going to happen, and there shouldn't be anything on there at all that has not been part of your general flight training up until that point. All right. You've done a pre-license check flight. That should have prepared you adequately for the flight test itself. You shouldn't be there if you're not ready. And if you are feeling like you're being put up for a flight test just because you're flying a lot of time is expiring and running out and they've got another course, then speak up. Don't put yourself in that situation where you're going to be unprepared. All right. All right, so hopefully that helps you all with everything involved in an RPL and PPL flight test. An RPL flight test. A PPL flight test, I'll cover that one soon. Very, very similar in most aspects, but I will come to that one in a few episodes' time and talk about the differences in the ground component and the flight component. So that'll be a little bit shorter, but we'll address a lot of the issues there for a PPL flight test as well. All right, guys. Well, that is it for this episode. I am going to do a bit of GA training this week and a couple other things, a few OPCs and things, and then off to Cairns next week. Very much looking forward to that and the discussions that are going to be had. In the meantime, I would love it if you would share your stories with me. Again, email. All the details are in the episode notes in the browser that you are using right now. And I look forward to reading those and touching base with you all. Right, until then, please stay safe, blue skies as always, and remember the golden rule: aviate, navigate, communicate. Cheers, everyone.